Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Modern Market. This is our daily show from Monday to Friday at 7 a.m. Eastern Time, 12 p.m. GMT, every day of the week, where we discuss all things to do with the modern market. That is the crypto market, the NFT market, the Gordon Goner market, and also how to make money by leveraging the internet and the latest technologies. I'm your host, B-Check. I'm joined by my legendary co-host, Legendary. We have some good friends of the show up top with us to start. We've got Riggs, we've got Funky. Can't wait to introduce them as we get into a discussion on today's latest news from the NFT market. But before we do get there, just as a reminder, friends, nothing that any of us say here is financial advice. This modern market is exceptionally risky. We do not know anything for sure. Please do proceed with caution and exercise your own judgment at all times. With that out of the way, Legendary, how are you doing this Wednesday, the 8th of November?
GM, you missed a very, very rare sight that got me excited. NFT Stats in the audience used an emoji. He uses them very, very rarely. I've been looking at some of the statistics. Sam used a total of 18 emojis. Compare that to our number one emoji user, Kusho. Kusho spent 82 hours and 37 minutes on Spaces with us.
What a
And used
legend.
18,000 emojis. So solid 1,000x on that number.
No. This
Funky,
number is broken. It's got
Funky
to be
is
broken.
sending the hearts. Funky is doing very well as well, by the way. Funky is up to 5K emojis over 33 hours and 43 minutes spent with us in the Spaces.
We did say back in the day, the real stats we need to be tracking. We know we've got NFT stats in the audience, but we need emoji stats. Who's going to be emoji stats? Who's going to know which space is getting the most emojis? I don't know about this 18,000 number, man. Is that even possible? Can the system just be broken, or is Kusho really
Look, I
just
know
getting
the
after
reason
it?
why you say it's not possible. It's because you're not number one any longer. You're number two with only 11K emojis. So I
Yeah,
think the number is
I've
very
given up actually
reasonable.
recently. I can't do it
Yeah,
anymore.
I did
With this
notice.
YouTube thing, it's just not possible for me to do emojis at the same time. I can't do it. I'm out.
The only thing that still frustrates me a bit about Super Spaces is that I can't see my own stats. Because in my mind, I'm the winner of that, right? I'm the number one, but it's never going to be documented for me, unfortunately.
That's so funny. I mean, well, I guess I'll be able to see your stats, so I'll be able to check for you. What's your instinct? Where are you on the emoji meter?
So hours spent in the space, my instinct is that I'm winning that with you because we are hosting the show. That would make a lot of sense, right?
Mm-hmm.
Emoji meter, I don't think that I can keep up with Kusho. I think, though, that I would be in between Kusho and you, definitely more than your poor 11K emojis, but not the 18K that Kusho has used so far.
God, I don't even know how I got to 11K. Have we done this show hundreds of times now? I know we went past 100. Have we got to
Yeah.
200 yet?
No, we had 140 hours spent together in Spaces.
Lord above. Okay. So many hours well spent. Well spent hours, don't you think, Legendary? Well spent hours.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I think without the modern market, I would be lost with what's going on in the market. That's not meant to be a shill for our own show, but even as of yesterday, when you had the news in the snapshot that Yoga Pets Kung's ecosystem is launching the Prana token earlier, like despite being a significant holder, I completely would have missed the news otherwise because I'm not on the Discord, didn't
Wait, but
see
I
it on
thought
the
you told
timeline.
me that.
No, I didn't tell you that. I told you I was excited about it after reading it in the snapshot, but I wasn't the original source of the information.
Do you know what? This is a very important point about how this ecosystem works. I have always felt that even when I write the snapshot, it's like because we all operate in different time zones, we're all kind of just passing the baton to each other in terms of the news. Like someone will say something, then someone else will wake up and that will make them think, oh, maybe I should look into that. And then they do look into that. Then they find out something which they then report on. And then by the time the other person has woken up, they then get the information that they had initially reported on, but now there's new information. And I think that's exactly what happened with the Prana thing. You mentioned it. It wasn't on my radar. It then came up on my timeline. I then reported on it, and then you get the secondary or third information. So yeah, it just always feels like we're just passing the baton to each other. And kind of, I think that's the model for success. Like if you have the people in your network that's just like, I'm going to do this. You reminded me of something. Okay, well now I've done a little bit on that, and you just keep going around in a virtuous circle in some respect. What do you think about that, Legendary? And then Riggs up one and a half.
Sounds good. I mean, as long as the accuracy of the news is still high, and a little news doesn't turn into a multi-billion-dollar FTV token drop that nobody talked about but gets inflated with each passing of the baton, I think that's fine. So as long as we stay true to the source and veracity of the news, it's good.
Yeah, agreed. Riggs, your hand is raised. What do you think about this virtuous, I can't say virtual circle, this virtuous virtual circle that has been created?
I mean, I wouldn't have been able to do my show for as long as I did without Snapshot and you all. I mean, half my news came from you. So it's one of those things. Now, I'm the guy, Legendary, who would try to take it, manipulate it, make it more dramatic. So I was actually probably leaning towards the person you weren't a fan of, but that's okay. I just wanted to give you your flowers because without the Snapshot early in my day, then I wouldn't have known what the hell was going on, and I would have just talked about random bullshit all day, which we did that sometimes too.
Yeah, I was going to say, Rick, sometimes you can do that anyway. You have the license to do that anyway. We don't want to stop the random bullshit either. But no, we appreciate it. And as I said, the only way that I'm able to do the snapshot early your time, which is like I get to do it in my morning, is because there are so many other good people producing so much good stuff, which I can then see by the time I wake up. So obviously NFT stats, I lean on a lot. Tyler, Lucky Trader, I lean on a lot. And then there's all kinds of other people who are just producing great stuff around the clock, which enable us to just keep producing and condensing stuff in manageable ways. So that's nice. That's a nice way to start in this virtuous virtual circle that we've created for ourselves. Glad that we are all in it at the same time. But let's get into the rest of the show today. But before we get into the headlines and the price action, as always, please help us out by clicking that comment button in the right-hand corner, retweet the spaces. And as always, if you want to follow along with the snapshot, it is pinned up top. It has the information I'm about to share. So please do like it if you think it brings you some value today. So let's get into it, starting with the headlines. Number one, Gordon Goner NFT spree continues with a toad, sappy seal, and a gold penguin. Some context from NFT stats. The collection grows with a hoodie toad bought for 4.9 ETH and a gold skin sappy seal bought for 2.15 ETH. There were 40 more toads sales after he bought, sending the floor up 25%. That's quite good to see. Next, USDC issuer Circle considers an IPO in 2024. Thought that was very interesting. Going to get into that a little bit later. Mike Dudas, prominent investor, said that this would be terrific for market legitimacy. USDC, an increasingly important part of the most used crypto apps and the first token many people touch. And finally, this is a super interesting one, which I'm quite close to. Lil Nouns DAO exercises veto to prevent the fork of 16 nouns worth 400 ETH. The founder of Lil Nouns said that he felt that he had to use the veto to prevent a non-trivial risk to Lil Nouns DAO, including the risk of someone being able to unequally withdraw the treasury for personal gain. So we've been talking about how on-chain governance is becoming a little bit more fun, a little bit more political, a little bit more exciting. Going to dive into some of the dynamics there in just a bit. Getting into the floor prices, we have CryptoPunks at 50, Bored Apes at 29.3, up 3%, Mutants at 5.6, also up 3%, DGod's up 5% at 3.4, Captain's down 6% at 3.8, Azuki's up 9 at 5.8, Penguins at 5.2, up 3, Moonbirds at 2, Nouns at 24 ETH, and a couple of top sales. We've got CryptoPunk VR selling for 92 ETH. That is $173,000. And the Pudgy Penguin mentioned was a golden one selling for 38.7 ETH. That is $73,000. Legendary. That's the price action. Those are the headlines. What numbers are you liking?
I mean, obviously, given my PFP, I do like the movement in the Azuki collection. But what I also like in particular is the VR punks. seeing VR punks moving is good. We spoke about them
You loved your
months
thesis
ago.
on VR
Yeah, I'm
punks.
still sticking with my VR punks thesis and the Apple Vision Pro as the like mixed reality headset, that this will be a very desirable trade in the future, you know, going a decade into the future, when we won't be streaming that on YouTube, we won't be on StreamYard looking at each other's like small pictures next to the screen share of the snapshot, but we will be in our virtual mixed reality Apple Vision Pros and other brands. And then this will be a grail trade in the CryptoPunks collection. Just as you're equally excited about Memeland and other projects renting out boats, yachts, pirate ships, whatever it is, as a bull thesis, I'm going with the VR goggle bull thesis.
Yeah, fair enough. I think your thesis might be a bit more lasting. It might stand the test of time a bit more in the sense that yours is forward looking and mine is very, very backwards looking, in the sense that the older the ship, the better the investment, in my opinion. The older the ship that sails the seas of Hong Kong, the better the investment. That was my thought anyway, because I saw Animoca did the cruise and it was like this. It was a nice looking cruise. It was a nice modern boat, but I really did think that I thought the older ship was better. Basically, anyone who took to the water did well in that week. However, I did think the older Memeland ship looked cooler. Just another point on the numbers, though, Legendary. Seems like a little bit of movement in the sense that the things that didn't move last week started to move this week. The things that did move the week before have then retraced now significantly. So Memeland obviously had a lot of volatility last week. It recovered almost up to like 4.8, 4.9. That seems to be back down at, where was it? Back down at 3.8, so down 6%. Mochaverse went on a really crazy run the last few days. That has retraced as well. But now the more traditional, well, I say traditional, but some of the projects which had already been up there for a while, DGod's up 5%, Penguins up 3%, Bored Apes up 3%, along with Mutants. Do you think that's like a rotation, or do you just think the other ones were overbought, so now just corrected a little bit, and the other ones were just didn't get much attention in that period of time?
Maybe a bit of both. On the one hand, you know, the relative lows concept that we've spoken about so many times on the show. On the other hand, you obviously still have that, you know, run on something, FOMO creation, as you mentioned with the Mochaverse. I think the peak floor that they hit for a very brief time, admittedly, was like 2.7 ETH before they then corrected. But then also, but that's then part of the first news we will get into in a moment. The question remains of the Gordon effect on NFT floor prices.
Indeed. Okay, well, let's get into it then. Let's just get into the first news. We mentioned in the last 24 hours, well, we mentioned the big CryptoPunk by Gordon Goner yesterday, and that was 600 ETH, which was 1.1 million, I believe, something like that. And then in addition, yesterday, he added to his purchasing spree after he did say that he was on the lookout for a little bit more foolishness, I think he called it. So this was his bag of foolishness: a hoodie cryptodes for 4.9 ETH, a gold Sappy Seal for 2.15 ETH, a gold DGod for 8 ETH, and a gold Pudgy Penguin for 38.69 ETH. In total, including the zombie CryptoPunk, that is 653.74 ETH, $1.23 million. What do you think about this bag of foolishness, Legendary?
It was quite entertaining to see the posts that came with it. In particular, looking at the post that Gordon did around the DGod, which was, okay, but what the fuck is a Ute? I quite laughed when I read that the first time. Quite amusing.
Yeah, he seems to be enjoying himself.
It's good.
Let's go to. I want to say a couple more things on that, but Riggs, your hand is raised. What's your thought on this little buying spree? Is it something intentional, marketing related, or is it just a guy having some fun, buying some JPEGs?
I think it's just a guy having some fun buying some JPEGs. I mean, the dude's been down and out. He's got health issues. the space historically, and you can feel it, is better when Gordon's around. We love Gordon. That said, are we in 2021 where Gary V would buy something, and the moment Gary would buy it, the floor pumps, and it has zero to do with the actual project?
Correct.
Secondly, the hypocrisy on the timeline is baffling.
In what sense?
There are other founders that have spent hundreds and thousands of ETH on things, and they get called grifters for taking the money from the treasury, which they didn't do, and buying NFTs. Yet Gordon does it, and he's celebrated. It's just one of those things that drives me absolutely bananas. It's freedom to transact, buy, sell, do whatever you want. Have fun with it. That's why I love Gordon. He doesn't give a fuck. Gordon's gonna have fun doing it. He's gonna do it his way. He's gonna say things like, "What the fuck is a Ute?" Like, I absolutely love it. And by the way, he tweeted last night, more tomorrow. So buckle up. Who knows what he's going for today? I think he's just gonna enjoy his time and really focus on fun again, because it's probably some of the things the doctor has told him to do.
Interesting. Okay, so I had a question. Oh, first question, Riggs, as a follow up, because maybe I can't remember if you were more connected to the Bored Ape ecosystem beforehand.
Yeah, I'm an early
sure
holder.
So I want to check with you. I know Legendary, you were an ape holder as well for some period of time. Why is it? Because I mean, I think the guy's a legend. I think he's really cool, but I'm actually not super familiar with him. But why do you think it is that there is this great affinity for Gordon in particular? And would I be right in saying that there's a bit more of an affinity for him over the other founders in particular? Like, that's just a general sense from someone who's on the outside, never really been on the inside, but that's just like, obviously I'm in the market all the time and observing. Am I right to sense that? And is there a particular reason for that? What's your thought, Riggs? Then want to hear from Legendary.
Yeah, he was the heart of the club.
Hmm.
And it has nothing to say negative around Garga or the other two co-founders as well. Garga is amazing, but the personality, the way that, I don't know, just the character of the club and the ethos of the club, I feel like Gordon embodied that.
Interesting.
And really pushed that forward. And I do think there's direct correlation of when you start to lose sight of what the value of the club is, when Gordon had to take a step back. And
interesting.
I think that's just plain and simple, but we love Gordo.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Like, it's just definitely, like, when you explain that, it definitely explained what I had sensed about the feelings towards him, and just the general perception of him versus the other people who are deeply connected with the project. And it's just interesting to feel that. So thanks for that context. Legendary, want to ask you just the same question. Is that something you experienced as well? And then we've got some couple of good comments down beneath that we want to bring up.
Yeah, absolutely. Couldn't resonate more with Rick's early magical vibes in the Discord that everyone like kind of keeps missing and speaking about. Were massively driven by Gordon, and that was fun to be in that space, not only on the timeline, in particular in the Discord. And I think that was also, the main reason why I got excited to see him back on the timeline. Obviously, the health stuff, not getting into that, but just good to see he's active again, and that instantly reminded me of the quote-unquote early BYC vibes.
Indeed. I think, yeah, that's definitely come across. Would love to hear from Sam in just a second. He mentioned in one of his tweets yesterday that there were 40 more toad sales after sending the floor up another 25%, and that project was already ripping. I wonder if Sam has had a chance to check any of the other projects. Do we expect the projects in this particular type of market to move on the basis of Gordon buys? But just want to check in with a couple of comments that we've had. Captain Zwingli from Coffee with Captain, another great show that takes place just after hours, said, in response to Carl's point, in in my opinion, the biggest difference is Gordon is using personal funds, not treasury. So that's one distinction to make. However, it's a good take. Ultimately, if freedom to transact gets limited, what are we even doing here? That is an important point.
Well, my point was it was about Kevin Rose. Kevin Rose.
Sure. Yeah. So you were making
he's never used treasury funds.
Sure.
But people always make that point and try to make that assumption. So.
Yep, I think there is that point, and another person who actually may have been, I don't know to what extent Frank's buys for when they were moving from Solana to ETH. I don't know if that was treasury or whether that was personal, because that I think actually was arguably a legitimate business expense, and maybe in that case it actually would have been legitimate business. But to your point, you're saying whenever someone, like say for example, if Kevin had used treasury funds, then that would have been criticized deeply, whereas I think Frank was kind of praised for using those funds on that occasion. So yeah, a little bit, I don't know the perfect details there, but I take your point about the kind of difference in perception sometimes. Just as a final point on that, from FT Pager, who suggests that I think Gordon Goner's buys are connected with this. And this is what we kind of touched on this in the last couple of days, Legendary, where we were saying, as they move towards this partnership with Magic Eden, will they want to impress and get on board all of the other projects? Because ultimately there's been a real fractionalization of marketplaces, right? You've got Blur, you've got OpenSea, but also in addition to this, and I was speaking about this maybe on another one of our shows, we said that some projects went off during this period of time and created their own marketplaces. They created their own marketplaces. I know Rec Guide did that. I know Pixel Vault did that. And so there will be a little bit, I'm sure there'll be a little bit of debate internally, like, well, do we move over to Magic Eden with whatever they've got planned? And I think, some public display of buying into other projects, trying to support them in particular ways might be nice. Now, obviously that's pure conjecture. It could have nothing to do with that, as Rig said. But, there could be a nice little follow-on thought. Legendary, thought on that? Then we'd love to hear from Sam in a second.
Yeah, I mean, you said everything there's to say on that, right? You start with a new marketplace. You will have already the challenges to get apes to move over for all the issues we discussed around enforcing royalties on the apes contract. But then you also want to attract initial liquidity. One point is to create an incentive system like Blur did. The other point is to establish goodwill. If those purchases are connected or not, I don't know. But even if they're not connected, some people connect them in their minds. And that's already goodwill that's being created, even if it wasn't the intention.
Yeah, makes sense. NFT Stats, Sam, welcome. What's your thought on either just the buys in general, but also this potential connection to the future marketplace?
I think it's interesting. I mean, I think I agree with what was said before, that when you kind of think about what made apes so special and what made them this kind of unicorn within this world of NFTs, that suddenly people were buying apes and part of this community, it was largely being part of what Gordon Goner was building. And it was his energy, it was him being in the Discord, it was whatever it was, the ridiculousness that it was, that really turn this into something huge. And it's kind of interesting watching now with everything that Yuga's doing, they're trying to make them remain valuable without what it was that made them special in the first place, which was Gordon. So I think people are really happy to have Gordon back, because he's very, I mean, I don't know if he's back for an ape, but just having back in the ecosystem. And so I think I don't know. It's I personally really like Gordon a lot. So I think it's cool the way he's doing this, and it's fun. It reminds me a little bit though of like when a new NFT would get added to Blend, suddenly it would pump, and like there was no reason for that NFT to pump, because Blend like has never been good for floor prices. It's actually kind of been a bad thing for floor prices over time, or neutral. but you'd get these, you kept getting these pumps. I kind of feel the same way here. It's like we get kind of trained for like, because a couple things pump, then when we see something happen, we want to be the first to do it because we think they're going to pump anyways, and we have a little flip opportunity or whatever. So I feel like that's a little bit the way the market's responding. Although after Toads, it kind of calmed down a little bit. I don't think it's meaningless when he buys something, and it's, in a game where everything is about kind of FOMO and being part of something you're happy and proud to be part of, and where you like the other holders and stuff. I guess there's some relevance, but the pumps have slowed down, versus cryptos where you got like, and I think for cryptos also it's kind of, I think there's kind of an interesting fit there with Gordo. But yeah, after that had the 25% pump, everything else that he bought is up, but it's not up as much.
Yeah, I love it. It's just back to the game of predicting what's the next thing going to be, and how if we get it soon enough after it happens, will there be a pump off the back? And yeah, as you say, it's often the case that after the first one, so cryptos definitely did do that. Maybe everything else is just settled down a little bit more now. But interesting, and I'm glad to have heard your perspective on Gordon as well. It's definitely someone who I just haven't been, because I was never actually in that ecosystem. It's just really nice to hear so many people speak so highly of him, and that one person was actually able to create that culture and energy. So yeah, really nice for me to hear.
The one thing I just throw in, I think the story that like the tweet "fuck it, Mutant Saturday" came from the Bored Ape Yacht Club, but that's kind of the Gordo energy.
Yeah,
it's like, fuck it, we're doing mutants here, and he was a guy who was like, if you're worried too much about the floor price, you got to go into a forest, do some shrooms, and think about what you can do to make your project awesome. Like that to me, that's what apes are about, and that's what makes them unique. So, and that's all Gordo.
Interesting. Yeah, that's so fun. And it's glad, we're very glad that he's back and seemingly much more healthy than before. Hopefully it continues. And hopefully these buys continue as well. We like reporting on it, makes people happy. Legendary, let's get into the next piece of news. I think we probably want to go the nouns DAO route for just a minute. I know that it's one of the things which people find slightly more complex in general. It is a complex ecosystem, but I'm involved in the little nouns, and this has been like pretty big news in our ecosystem in the last few days. I see a few little nouners in the audience as well. If you'd like to come up to correct me or help me out with any of this context, please do. English, Taku, Akva. If you've got a moment, be happy to have you up to be part of the conversation. Basically, one of our friends, Little Mike Good, wrote this really great write-up on what basically happened. In principle, the headline is that Lil Nouns used their veto. So Lil Nouns holds 16 nouns, and the reason why that's really good is because the nouns treasury obviously has a lot more ETH, millions of dollars in it. The fact that Lil Nouns holds all of these nouns means that we can vote in that, we can participate in the governance, we can propose proposals up, and then we can vote on them as well. So if you were a Lil Noun and you had a really good idea, we could help sponsor that proposal to go up. And then not only can you sponsor it, you can then say like, right, we like this idea. Now you have our 16 votes as well. So that's really cool. But as people should be aware of, we've reported on it here many times, this fork mechanism was introduced in the last few months, where it means that the nouns treasury, which is the main nouns treasury, if you are unhappy for whatever reason, and there's a certain number of people who want to leave the DAO with you, you can fork. And so you can take the book value, which is figured out like a certain amount, and you and your unhappy nouners can leave the DAO, and you have this proportion of the treasury goes with you. So that has happened twice already. So there's been 2 forks. The DAO, they used to have, I think it was approaching $50 million in there. That got halved, not quite halved, but a significant amount taken off, down to about 20 million after the first fork. Then the second fork happened, and so there's a few million less there now. And basically, in the little nouns community, we have 16 nouns, and there seems to be a group of people who wanted to start a third fork. So I'm just going to read some of this information as written, because it's interesting, like historically. And also the reason why it's important is because we've been speaking about how on-chain governance is becoming more fun, it's becoming more political, it's becoming more exciting. Like, I think this stuff will become more interesting to people. It's been impossible to get people to vote on things and take an interest before, but I think that will change moving forward. So what was written is that historically we've had large voting blocks that have pushed to only acquire nouns using an auto bidder. And as a community, we had therefore been obliged to lean into this as our main value prop. But when, as I said, when nouns implemented version 3, there was this fork mechanism that was allowed. So a new prop went up to try to fork these nouns. But the reason given for vetoing was this. So conversations started to happen in the DAO. Multiple scenarios were being talked about in the chat. It was established that if these anonymous wallets actually controlled our vote, or if anyone coordinated and bought enough lils to capture in the time period, then potentially they could collude to not allow the little nouns to claim the ETH from the fork. And just to give you the context of who was in favor and who was against, there were 1,330 yes votes to fork, but that came from only 2 active community members and 5 Ethereum addresses. And the no vote was 1,184 votes, which came from 36 addresses with around 25 active community members. So the potential risk here was that the argument was from one side that this leaves the DAO exposed, and this could be like an attack on the DAO. So in the end, what will likely happen, because they decided to veto, they said we think we're at risk, so we're not going to let that happen. But ultimately, we're still going to have to sell the nouns, because the large voters will just continue to push for the sale, right? Because they've got all of these votes, whether we like it or not. So it's this interesting mechanic where it's like, well, what are we going to do if we're not going to let you fork? Then we're probably going to have to accept that we're going to have to sell them at a minimum, because you have all the votes to vote down everything else if you wanted to, and you have the ability to just keep pushing because you've got all of these votes. So it's a very complex situation, but ultimately an unprecedented situation in the sense that the vote, the veto is looked upon very poorly in DAO ecosystems, because we're trying to create a decentralized ecosystem, right? Like where there isn't one central point of failure or one central point of authority. And so the idea is that in an ideal world, you wouldn't need to lean back on this veto feature, because that's like a centralized type of thing. So yeah, it's a kind of a historic moment in the nouns ecosystem, the fact that the veto was used in the little nouns thing to prevent the fork of the 16 nouns. And now we're going to have to kind of figure out how we move forward with these people who want to fork versus the people who don't, and how we kind of move forward with the decentralized values. Legendary, want to just get your thoughts on that first, then would love to go to English, who is also a good friend and little Nauna, would certainly know more about it than me even. And then Funky has his hand raised too.
Yeah, actually want to change the order on that and also hear from English first before I give my thoughts on it.
Sounds good. English, how was my summary? Was that fair? Anything you'd like to add, or any other context or interesting stuff?
Jim, yeah, it's a little early for me. Normally I can't chat, but I did want to chime in a little bit on this. So I'll try to be as succinct as possible. There's a lot to unpack. I think you covered the majority of it. Maybe I want to give it some social context and some historical context.
Yes,
So,
please.
with the bear market, a lot of projects have found themselves with less and less resources, and little nouns is no different. So the treasury has been going down, and that's fine. But there's always been this kind of push and pull, kind of, should we acquire more nouns? And is that more valuable than keeping money in the treasury to fund builders? So during a time when there was really no talk about forking or arbitrage opportunities in big nouns, There wasn't this large cohort of large people accumulating little nouns. And when that started to happen, there's been some people that started buying little nouns, and at the same time pushing to buy more nouns. But the whole idea is they never proposed it as like an arbitrage opportunity to provide more money for little nouns. They just said, okay, well, this is the value proposition. The value proposition is we can fund builders at big nouns by supporting people who have done MVPs in little nouns via our own treasury, and then we can graduate them to big nouns. Now move over to the fork, and now all of a sudden the people that have been wanting to buy nouns have been wanting to sell them. And that at a time when new people have come into the treasury, the DAO, and people we've never seen before, people that are anonymous in terms of voting, all of a sudden want to sell all the nouns, or rather fork it, but with the idea that it could be sold. And then somebody flags, well, here are a couple case issues that if we were to do this, there's a non-trivial, non-zero chance that we'll never get the money. So if you take the idea that these people that buy nouns, whether it's large nouns or little nouns, and the whole idea is to max arbitrage in their favor, and all of a sudden there's an unusual uptick of people buying little nouns, it just kind of puts a red flag. So then it puts into the case, well, should we even be selling these nouns, or is there another method? And it's always been the case, whether you were pro selling the nouns to fund the treasury or buy more nouns so we can fund people at big nouns, there's another mechanism, whether it's OTC trade or Blur. And with that in light, it just seems that why take a risk of getting zero return, even regardless of if it's an edge case or not, when we can just sell them and maybe take a 5 or 10% haircut, OTC or Blur method. So that's kind of it. And I don't want to get too far into it. I know you got a show to move on and you have other topics. The other part about it is the veto thing. So as you mentioned, there was only 2 anonymous people that versus 30 or 40. Dot, one of the co-founders, the most active co-founder, he was in the Discord, 20-hour long or 18-hour long Discord, VC, and people chatting, getting back information. And anybody who was part of the DAO understood that the veto was in place in terms of as a possibility from an attack from the treasury. So if you look at it, I think the amount of nouns either equals or surpasses the amount that we have in the treasury in terms of assets. So over a 50% attack on the treasury seems like the reason a veto was in place. So although it's against the idea of decentralization, it is kind of a fail-safe. So I just wanted to provide a little bit of social and historical context to the actual numbers and stats that you guys gave.
I love it, man. Thanks so much for that. I think it's really helpful. It probably it's harder to understand in the absence of that social historical context. It's one of the more complex ecosystems around. So thank you so much for that. I really appreciate it. One of the key questions coming out for me from that explanation from English is this question of like, to what extent is the veto?
You guys realize you're muted?
Yeah, I thought I was rugging and I was going to have to drop down as to listener. And I was like, well,
oops. Yeah. My bad. I'm back now, right?
I mean, I could take over.
You're good.
No, I'm just kidding. You did great. Hopefully that provided some kind of context to the conversation. And again, it's hard for me to be succinct. Normally I could chat forever, and I didn't want to, go at too long, on the conversation, but yeah.
My bad. I'm back now. Yeah.
Yeah, you're good, B-Check.
All good. Yeah, I said, thanks so much, man. It's really, really helpful to understand that stuff, or to put it in its social historical context is super important. It makes it way easier to understand, but it is complex. So thank you for that. It kind of, the question coming out of it that makes me ask is, like, there seems to be real 2 groups of people here, where one group of people kind of saying the veto is like, the veto invalidates the DAO. Like, there is that line of thinking where certain people are like, the veto invalidates the DAO. It makes the DAO pointless. It's not really a DAO if you are going to use it. And then you suggested that other side, English, which was, well, it exists. it exists. It exists when every single person joined. Everyone knows that it exists. It's a fail-safe. It's a protection mechanism. One of the thoughts I thought the other day was like, look, if the fork is a protection mechanism which exists, the veto is a different protection mechanism which exists. Now, maybe one is more decentralized and one is less, but either way, they're in a sense protection mechanisms. So it's interesting to see that battle kind of take place between those two people. Any final thoughts on that, English, before we go to Funky and hear Legendary's thoughts?
Yeah, I'll just put an asterisk on that comment. So there is two camps, as you mentioned, but out of the people who are in the camp of against vetoes in general, there's maybe one or two people that don't like the idea and they're upset about it, as opposed to maybe, let's call it 30-40% of the people that are against veto from a philosophical standpoint, but they appreciated that it was used here in application. So I would venture to say that although there's some people who have said it's unfortunate we had to use it, I'd say the vast majority, and I'm talking about 90-95% of the people who are philosophically against it, are happy that it was used in this case and in the manner that it was used. Dialogue with the community, conversations. It wasn't unilaterally a founder saying, "Hey, I don't like this prop. I'm gonna veto it." So just wanted to add that asterisk to it.
Yeah, super interesting. I think this is one of the challenging realities of governance, and not just in respect to the veto, but in any respect, right? Like sometimes you have to do things which people, even internally, are uncomfortable with, but you feel like, look, for whatever reason, the way things have shaken out, we just have to do this on this occasion. So I'm not even speaking specifically to do with the veto there, but that can happen with other things too. So really interesting there. Thanks so much, English. Really, really helpful to provide some extra context. Funky, your hand is raised. What are your thoughts? And then Legendary, definitely want to gather your thoughts at the end of this.
Thanks so much, B-Check. I think mine is probably going to be similar to Legendary's because I know he's a fan of a lot of this on-chain governance stuff. At the end of the day, I find this all incredibly fascinating with regard to this burgeoning sort of sociological experiment with DAOs. And one thing that's becoming rapidly clear to many people is that, I think we go into DAOs with this sort of maybe even naive assumption that, oh, one vote, one person, one vote, it's very democratic. And what we're starting to find, it's that there are centralization choke points. It's very often highly plutocratic, right? Like where if you're a whale and you have tons of capital or assets or what have you, you can really move the vote in a direction that that maybe even goes against what the common person who is participating in this system might not want. So it's just a really interesting thing. I think we're seeing a lot of what makes us human show up in these DAO structures, right? With the lobbying, factions being created and everything else. It's just really an interesting time to watch all of this sort of emerge.
Absolutely. I agree with everything that you just said. It's definitely the case that it kind of reveals, well, we're trying to do governance. So all of the good things and all the bad things, the political things about politics, and trying different people with different opinions going up against each other. Like it's all just playing out in an interesting way. Legendary, your thoughts and reflections on this.
Yeah, Funky was very right to assume that I lean in a similar camp. Ultimately, it's humans experimenting with a new form of governance, so they will show human behavior, and that is fascinating to observe. And in that context, I think it is important, when DAOs are still in their infancy, to have those fail-safes, to have maybe a veto mechanism or other protection mechanisms before we can establish more mature governance processes and like kind of gold standard for DAOs. I mean, think about Mockaverse. I think we saw it even there that someone swept a shit ton of Mockaverse PFPs, went for a vote, and then dumped them. If you add to that you now have protocols like Flooring Labs, where you could essentially also gain additional ways to leverage your capital to have access to more votes, swing a particular vote that is of interest to you, and then don't even really need to get very involved with the DAO, but just need to have the capital to be able to influence it, and also being able to leverage that adds even more to that complexity. So I absolutely agree that we also need those protection mechanisms, but even more so, it's just fascinating to observe on-chain governance.
Absolutely. I agree with that. And as we've been saying, it's something which I think people are going to realize is more fun and more interesting than they thought. It will be frustrating at times, but I do think people will start to enjoy the process and the discussion more about this on-chain governance. And just a point from a personal perspective, being in the Little Nouns ecosystem, I'm not writing in there all the time, but I've been following all of this stuff, and just the amount of passion and energy and care that's been taken by the people on both sides, frankly. But like, there's so many people who care so much about this DAO, and it's very interesting to observe. It's very interesting to participate in. And I think if you do want to get involved, figure out like what's going on with DAOs in general, you can't really go worse than the Nouns ecosystem, frankly. Like, Little Nouns is a great starting point. There's some other really good DAOs as well, like Nas DAO, and some others. It's very, very fun. It's very interesting. So I'd encourage you to try to get some experience in them, because if this is the way funding goes in future as well, you want to have a good handle on like how the decisions get made and how to vote and how to participate. So definitely take a look. English, give us a final point as your hand is raised, and then we're going to move on.
Final point. So if just because you're kind of giving a shout out, so most people who are in either Nouns or Little Nouns, they're probably part of other kind of sub DAOs, and there's several of them. You had just mentioned that you have always been following it and appreciate the passion. Little Nouns specifically is known to be a little bit special. There's always a lot of heated debates. It's probably the most active in terms of actual just discourse going on in Twitter. So if whether you like that just to learn, or you like that type of engagement, for some reason, and there's no rational reason why Little Nouns versus another one, but it is kind of a special little DAO. So I would encourage anybody who's curious on DAOs that if you were to pick one specific, it's probably not a bad place to start.
Yeah, I mean, the passion is unrivaled, almost to the point where if you come in from the outside cold, you will have no idea what's going on for a little period of time. Like, why are these people arguing? But also, why do they really like each other? And how does this dynamic work where everyone is just having such a great time at the same time as like vehemently disagreeing on particular points, but just moving on and getting on with it? But as you say, definitely worth checking out. But we want to get to the final headline today. We're just going to give you the quick Web3 roundup and Creator Corner news so you get up to speed with what else is going on in the space in the last 24 hours. We have Forgotten Runes releasing the Runeverse game on Arbitrum to great reviews. That's very interesting. They seem to be doing really cool stuff. Next, OpenSea valuation has been marked down by 90%. In 2022, two of their investors led a $300 million round for the NFT marketplace, valuing the platform at $13.3 billion in its Series C. So a lot of value lost there for OpenSea. Next, A16Z announced a $4.2 million investment in Pimlico, a product suite to enable wallet developers to embed account abstraction. Interesting point there. A16Z have obviously just opened up in London, and this is a UK-based company. And I've just been hearing a lot of positive noise from A16Z about what they're doing here in the UK. So that's nice to hear. Next, the most anticipated Web3 game, Shrapnel, to launch a token today. I believe that is live now. Moving into the Creator Corner, Jake Fried sells 100 editions of North Star for 1 ETH for a 100 ETH raise. Digital fine art still performing very, very nicely. Another cool news, Manifold announces that Prince of Slime Sunday's Last Stand of the Nation State is available on Shopify. That is cool. And finally, Zblocks announces 250K prize pool to fund ideas and dreams of creators. You definitely want to check this out if you're a creator of some sort. Arsenic, who is one of the artists behind it, said there's a there's one $50,000 grant, two $25,000 grants, and five $10,000 grants, and 20 $5,000 grants. And it just says to like fund your ideas. There are no more specific details. Go check it out if you are interested in that respect. Legendary. That is the Creator Corner and Web3 roundup from the news. Shall we get to the final headline today?
Absolutely. I'm very happy to take that one away, especially as you mentioned the OpenSea valuation that previously was at 13 bill, absurdly high number compared it to stable to Circle's last valuation in 2022, which was at 7.7 bill. Getting into the news though, there are rumors that USDC issuer Circle is considering an IPO early in 2024. There's not really an official statement confirming that by Circle. However, there is a statement saying becoming a US listed public company has long been a part of Circle's strategic aspirations. We don't comment on rumors. Also, additionally, I think it's good to know that it's not the first time that they're trying to go public. They actually did try that last year. They wanted to do a blank check deal. Basically, company gets acquired and the company who acquires Circle is the one who goes public, which ultimately failed, which didn't go through. And I think back then when they had that attempt in 2022, the valuation for Circle was at $9 billion. I think it's also good to know that Circle raised money from Goldman, from BlackRock, I think also from Fidelity Management. So definitely very significant if they will do an IPO. And I think it would be a good sign to see that from a trust perspective, to be a US listed company from a perspective of kind of moving our space forward, establishing stablecoins even further. And it was a nice news, a nice rumor to have. But obviously I'm a bit cautious with it because I know that they tried to do that last year. So let's see if it will go through this time or not.
Yeah, I like it. I like it a lot. I think the stablecoin market generally is just super, super important. I think it's unbelievably bullish for the dollar. I know a lot of people think everything's going to go, you know, everyone is so pro crypto that the dollar, I don't know, fades into irrelevance or whatever. And I know it has its own issues, but the truth of the matter is that it's got such a huge market cap already. Like, people want USDC, people want USDT, and they certainly want it a hell of a lot more when compared with other national coins. So I think that's very good. I like the sound of it a lot. Would love to hear Sam's thoughts on this in a second. Oh, Sam, you can come in if you'd like.
On which one? On USDC?
Yeah, USDC going public.
I mean, this is one of those things that I've been thinking about for a little while and wanting to tweet about. Like, it is, for all the negative press that Tether gets, like pretty much I've been reading a lot of the crypto's a Ponzi type books, like Number Go Up and like Easy Money, and they all love to focus on Tether, and probably with good reason. But right now, with an $86 billion market cap paying no interest to Tether holders, they can literally just earn $4.4 billion a year. Like, because they can just literally by having it in money markets. The interest is $4.4 billion a year because they're paying 0 and earning 5% on $86 billion. I mean, this business is absolutely bananas. I know that USDC has started paying some interest, like 2% or something, but they have $24 billion that they can basically earn 5% on, and their holders don't demand anything back. Like, USDC holders do not demand interest. They're starting to get a little bit, but like most of the people just don't want to take their money into the fiat banking system. So they'll keep it in USDC and earn nothing. Like, these businesses are bananas. So in a high, as long as they're maintaining their books in any decent way, cashing in on a 5% interest environment where the numbers they're going to print are going to be mind-boggling, and it's got to be insanely high margin. Like, it's just kind of an incredible business. Going public would make sense. I mean, they're leveraging the fact that a lot of people don't want to enter the banking system, largely because they don't want, in many cases, their crypto accounts to be revealed or whatever it is.
Yeah.
But man, these are just insane businesses.
Pretty crazy, right? Do you remember a while ago? I think it was the leader, not leader. Sometimes I start calling these people the leaders. The CEO of Tether saying that they're making so much profits that they were buying like Bitcoin with a bunch of the excess profits. Do you remember that? Or is that me making it up?
No, I think that Probably, I mean, that sounds right. I mean, and I think that Tether has all sorts of shenanigans that they've been able to work around. And like they had a bank run at some point, I think they would have had trouble, but they haven't to a serious extent. People have continued to trust them. And, if they have any holes in their system, well, you're making $4 billion a year right now just on interest. You can kind of cover them up pretty quick.
Yeah, that's such an important point. And yeah, I hadn't quite thought about the idea that when we hold USDC, like if we had that money in the bank, we'd expect something in return, but we just don't ask that of anyone when we're holding USDC. I'd never quite thought of that. Although, yeah, it makes complete sense now that we articulate that out loud.
I mean, the government will pay you 5.2% for your dollars right now, and we're expecting zero.
And we still don't do it. Or some people, well, maybe they do in a proportion, but people want a certain amount liquid and ready in a decentralized wallet so that they can do other things with it. So very important point. Very important point.
To your point, B-Check, yes, you remember that correctly. I think it was in May where Tether said that they want to reinvest some of their reserves into Bitcoin. They just looked it up. They already did it. They hold $1.7 billion in BTC, also invested in sustainable Bitcoin mining, etc. And if you put that into perspective of the numbers that Sam just shared, I think the 1.7 billion BTC is just a bit more than their quarterly profit early this year in Q1 and Q2.
Interesting.
The flip side is we have no idea what they're really doing because they've actually never been audited, and people have a hard time really figuring out who their bank is. Like, there's a lot of weird stuff going on there, but they have never had an issue redeeming dollars. So.
Yeah, absolutely. We can just go by the numbers and stuff that they're sharing with us, and ultimately, unfortunately, you have to trust them.
Well, it's definitely a good business model. And so for Circle, I can see why it'd be very appealing. And maybe for other investors, having a US version, like one that is IPOing in the US, maybe that will give people some comfort as well. So guys, that was a really interesting discussion on a number of levels, the Circle stuff, the DAO stuff, the NFT speculating stuff. It's been a great discussion. As always, we have unfortunately run out of time for today's show. But please do join us again tomorrow. We will be back. Have a lovely day. Thank you, Legendary, for co-hosting. Thank you to our speakers, Sam, Riggs, English, for stepping up with the DAO knowledge. And thank you to everyone else. It's been a great show. Have a lovely day. Bye-bye.